I rise to speak in support of my new clause 107, which stands in my name, and to lend support to other vital amendments, in particular those relating to protest rights, joint enterprise, facial recognition and predictive policing technologies. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll begin with my new clause, which would require the Home Secretary to publish a comprehensive equality impact assessment within 12 months of this bill becoming law. Now, I do acknowledge the initial equality impact assessments, but I must stress that these initial assessments are no substitute for a thorough and ongoing review of how these powers will be used and who they will affect. This bill touches every part of our criminal justice system, from police powers to sentencing to surveillance, and if we know anything from decades of experience, is that such legislation rarely lands equally. We already know, for example, that black men are disproportionately stopped and searched, that Muslim communities are targeted by counter-terrorism laws, that ethnic minority communities are more likely to face over-policing, under-protection and systemic mistrust. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, we must also talk frankly about how this system fails women, particularly in the context of violence against women and girls. Because whilst the state has found countless new ways to expand police powers and increase maximum sentences, we are yet to find the will to use those powers to properly protect women. Not when women who report domestic abuse and sexual violence are ignored, and not when black, minoritised and working class women who report violence are dismissed. And rape, not when rape is effectively decriminalised, with cases rarely making it to court. And let's not forget those cases that have shocked the nation, the reports that expose misogyny, racism and abuse within police ranks, and the institutional discrimination and failures that some forces still fail to admit exist. We have a lot of work to do to rebuild trust between police and communities, and that's why new clause 107 matters so much, because if we're going to hand over even more power to the police and the state, then we also need to demand more scrutiny, more accountability and more transparency. We have to ask, what does this mean for women, for survivors and for marginalised communities? A full post-legislative equality impact assessment will help ensure that this House understands the real-world effects of the laws it passes, particularly on women and girls, and particularly on those whose experiences are shaped by intersecting inequalities of race, class, immigration status and more. Madam Deputy Speaker, I also want to voice my continued support for amendments relating to joint enterprise in the name of my honourable friend, the member for Liverpool Riverside. Too many young people, disproportionately young black men, have been convicted under joint enterprise while simply being present, not for pulling a trigger or wielding a knife or planning a crime, but for being in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. And sometimes this place just happens to be where they live. This doctrine relies on racist assumptions about gang affiliation and collective guilt, and despite repeated warnings from campaigners, academics and even senior judges, nothing has changed. That is why these amendments are so important to review, to correct and to prevent any further injustices. I want to end by reaffirming my support for new clause 50 that protects the fundamental right to protest and the potential infringement of protest in the bill overall. Protest isn't a nuisance, it's a vital part of democracy, whether it's the suffragettes demanding the vote, trade unionists fighting for fair pay, or Black Lives Matter campaigners calling for racial justice. Every major advance in civil rights has come through protest. I stand here today as a black woman from a working class background because of the organising, resistance and, yes, protest of those who came before me. Any legislation that seeks to silence dissent or criminalises those who dare to challenge power has to be wrong. And if the history of protest has taught us anything, it's that the struggles of today are a mark of progress tomorrow. We mustn't continue the legacy of the previous government, which chipped away at civil liberties under the guise of public order. Our job as lawmakers is to protect the right to be heard and not to repress it. And really, finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I wanted to reiterate my concern about the provisions in the bill related to facial recognition, artificial intelligence and actually predictive policing, and these are addressed in clauses that are in the names of the members for Leicester South and Brighton Pavilion. These technologies are not neutral, they're trained on biased data, they are deployed in biased ways, and they pose a very real threat to civil liberties and racial justice. Facial recognition has been shown time and time again to be less accurate in identifying black and brown faces. Predictive policing draws on historically racist patterns of enforcement and then uses this data to justify further surveillance in the same communities. This is automated injustice, and if we pass this bill without proper guardrails, we'll be responsible for unleashing technologies that entrench discrimination in ways we do not yet fully understand, and which those affected will feel for years to come. Madam Deputy Speaker, the role of this House is not just to pass laws, it's to ensure that those laws are just and that their impacts are fair and that they reflect the values of equality and accountability that we all claim to stand for. And that means demanding better protections for women and girls, particularly in the face of state and police failure, and that means defending our right to protest and ending legal doctrines like joint enterprise, which sweep up the innocent with the guilty, and that means putting the strictest safeguards around surveillance technologies which are already disproportionately harming minoritised communities. And that would also mean putting in place something like new clause 107 to make sure that we properly assess and monitor the real effects of how the powers we grant in this House are affecting the most marginalised in our community.
Yeah.